Welcome to the Mark Divine Show. I'm your host, Mark Divine. Thanks for joining me today. Super stoked to have you here. On this show, I dive into topics around things that fascinate me, especially how to unlock unlimited potential, how to perform at your peak over a long period of time, how to develop yourself in a holistic, integrated manner to tap into more awareness, more consciousness, greater perspective, more compassion, and those types of things. These are the qualities that leaders will need in the age of AI, exponential technology, which is on us. So we want to learn how to develop and how other people who are unbeatable develop things like intuition and creativity and spontaneous knowingness, and how to unlock that same potential with your team. That leads to 20 times results. So that's what we do here. Sometimes I have guests who are doing incredible work themselves, and other times, like today, I'll just have a solo recording where we'll go into a topic of interest and just chat about it. So today I'm continuing my discussion on the 7 commitments to forge elite teams, which is a subtitle of my 2020 book, which came out right on the eve of the pandemic, called Staring Down the Wolf. These 7 commitments are practices or concepts that, when embodied in a leader and practiced with their teams, can unlock massive potential, and they are mostly are soft skills. And they would be things that can be developed through action, but also through contemplation, meditation, and visualization, and those type of softer skills. In other words, through a program like Unbeatable Mind. The 7 commitments are courage, trust, respect, growth, excellence, resilience, and alignment. I've done a solo episode on courage and trust, and today we're going to talk about respect. Back in 2001, after the 9/11 bombings, or after the 9/11 attacks, an individual named Captain Jim O'Connell, the Navy 06, was recalled back to active duty. He had retired. Now, Jim O'Connell was an incredible SEAL. He was a real warfighter, ended up being deputy commander at SEAL Team 6, or what we call Dev Group. And he has spent 20 some odd years running around the world, and his wife, in tow, and family in tow. And so he said, okay, that's enough for me. That's a pinnacle job. After this, I'm going to commit to my family. And so he had retired. And then some jerks flew these planes into the World Trade Center, and we find ourselves on the eve of war. And so the Navy basically called him back. We had this saying, I remember seeing in SEAL training on a Navy t-shirt. It had the picture of a frog behind in a glass jar. The frog had a bandolier on, a knife, and an AR-15, rifle. And the title of the shirt was "In Case of War, Break Glass." So basically, the notion there is that SEALs are dangerous. They don't belong hanging out in the civilian world. They should really be put behind glass jars. And when the war comes, you break the glass and let them out. Well, O'Connell was that kind of guy, and so they broke the glass and brought him back into the war. Now, this conversation is about respect. So right there shows you that, they could have put anybody. There were career officers just clamoring to take the job of leading the SEALs effort in the war on terror, and they brought someone out of retirement. I think one of the reasons they did that was because it was so coveted, nobody would have been happy except for the guy that they put in it. So why not put someone in it who's not only qualified, but doesn't even want the job? And that was Captain Jim O'Connell. Big respect right there. Well, O'Connell comes in and he starts putting the team together, and very quickly, right, we've got guys in the field, and we're doing incredible work over in Afghanistan. And so he's prosecuting that war for a few years, and then all of a sudden we invade Iraq, and you know how that goes. And now this is where I come in. The Iraq War, George Bush had declared mission accomplished on the aircraft carrier. Everyone thinks, yeah, that was easy. Now it's just about rebuilding this new democracy in the Middle East. Well, that didn't quite work out as planned, as you know. And by 2004, things were heating up really badly. By this time, the Marines were watching what was happening and all the money and attention that the SEALs and the special operations were getting, and they wanted to get into the special ops community. Most of you probably don't know this, but the Marines were not part of U.S. Special Operations until late 2007 or 8. And I was part of that effort in a very small way, and so was Captain Jim O'Connell and SEAL Team 1. So this is how it all came about. The Marines wanted to get in on Spec Ops, and Donald Rumsfeld, who was Secretary of Defense at the time, said, okay, we hear you. You are part of the Navy, and so we're going to do a proof of concept. So put together a 100-man team, and we'll call it the Marine SOCOM, Special Operations Command Detachment 1. But you're going to have this team work for SEAL Team 1 in combat for a 6-month deployment, and we'll study it. So the Marine Corps said, okay, grudgingly said, okay. They put together this hand-picked team of elite operators from various communities within the Marine Corps, obviously recon and intel and some of their black box communicators. And they're really neat guys. I loved working with them. And they assigned them to SEAL Team 1, led by Commander Wilson. Now, the Marine Corps hired I can't remember. They hired some big think tank to do their side of the study, and the Navy said, we need someone to do the study, and so we'll bring in the Joint Spec Ops University, which is within the military structure, but we need a Navy SEAL to lead that initiative who can deploy to combat. And just so happens, someone mentioned Mark Devine, who was at this time Lieutenant Commander Mark Devine, working at University of San Diego as an adjunct professor and helping run a leadership institute there, and working on my PhD in leadership. And this is back in 2004. And so Captain O'Connell said, okay, we need Devine, right? He's got somewhat of a research background. He can handle himself in the combat zone. He's a good communicator. Let's put him in charge of this. I've been using Momentous for over a year now. Honestly, it's changed how I think about supplements. I chose Momentous because they're not just another supplement company throwing flashy marketing at me. They actually do the science. I love their Momentous 3. I take it every single day. That's protein, creatine, and omega-3. Here's why that matters. Most of us aren't getting enough of these 3 critical nutrients from food alone. But those 3 form the foundation of everything. Muscle growth, recovery, brain function, energy, focus, you name it. It's like hitting the reset button on your cellular health every day. What else makes Momentum different is their standard. Their standard is insane. We're talking about Pure Creatine, the purest form available, grass-fed whey protein isolate, and omega-3s that are actually bioavailable. No gums, no fillers, no artificial anything, just the highest quality ingredients that your body can actually use. Every single batch is third-party tested and NSF certified. Those are the same standards used by all 32 NFL teams and over 200 pro sports organizations. When elite athletes and warriors need to trust something with their careers, you know that it's legit. That Momentum standard means that what's on the label is exactly what you're getting. No surprises and shortcuts. So if you're ready to switch to a supplement company that actually puts you first, head to livemomentous.com, livemomentous.com, and use the code DIVINE, DIVINE, for 35% off your first subscription. Again, use that code DIVINE at livemomentous.com for 35% off your first subscription. Thanks, Momentous, for sponsoring the Mark Devine Show. I had a pretty bad snowmobile accident 4 months ago, and the recovery process has put a damper on my training, as you can imagine. 8 broken ribs and a shattered scapula. At any rate, I was excited to start using Peak Pure Natural Peak Beats because it's not just another supplement. It's a simple way to support energy, circulation, and stamina, and it actually improved my training through this injury. Peak Beats is made from organic fermented beets that boost the body's natural nitric oxide production. That nitric oxide helps your blood vessels relax and expand. So more oxygen gets to your brain, your heart, and your muscles, which helps with recovery and also your training energy. Better blood flow equals clearer thinking, stronger workouts, and all-day energy. It's a game changer. Since I started mixing Peak Beats into my morning smoothie, I can actually finish my workouts much stronger and recover quicker. That energy boost kicks in fast, but it lasts all day. No crash and no jitters, just sustained warrior energy. And it tastes great with just a hint of sweetness and tartness. Right now, you can try Peak Beats for 25% off their regular price with no risk because you're covered by their lifetime money-back guarantee. Head over to their website at peaknatural.com, P-E-A-K natural, N-A-T-U-R-A-L.com /divine, D-I-V-I-N-E. Use that code DIVINE at checkout to give Peak Beats a try for 25% off. Remember, you're covered by their lifetime satisfaction guarantee, and this is a limited time offer. So hurry on over to peakbeats.com/divine so they know I sent you, and make sure to use that promo code divine at checkout to get that 25% off. So yours truly gets recalled by Captain O'Connell back to dude. This is where the second piece where respect is shown. Like when I heard that, I had known Captain O'Connell. I've met him a few times in the past, and my respect for this guy was through the roof. And the respect that the SEALs had for him was legendary, right? Legendary. And so when Jim O'Connell calls and says, "Hey, Mark, we've got a special project we think you're uniquely fit for. Would you come and do it?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." Right? I could have been recalled earlier. I was focusing on this PhD and on my family and on growing my business, NavySeals.com. And so it wasn't a requirement for me to do it yet. Eventually, I knew I would have to do it. But this time they asked, Captain O'Connell asked, and I said yes. And largely because I just really respected this individual. And the job sounded like it would be pretty interesting for me. So I ended up deploying to Baghdad with SEAL Team 1 with this 100-man SOCOM unit attached to it. Now, this is pretty interesting because I also had to attend a bunch of the pre-meetings on this issue with the admirals and all the Marines and basically people from Joint Spec Ops University. We had a lot of prep work before we went over to Baghdad. And there were, suffice to say, there were not many in the SEAL community who were too thrilled with this idea of the Marines coming in and taking a spot alongside on the table of spec ops. And that's because the Marines are also a maritime force. And there's, so basically a food fight could ensue over missions and funding. And so if it was going to be done, it needed to be done right, where they would have a distinct mission, distinct force structure, and there wouldn't be all this overlap and people grasping, from both sides, grasping for money and for missions. So a lot of, similar to the idea of women coming in Spec Ops, there were a lot of senior SEALs and enlisted SEALs who just said, no way, right? We should not support this. And they put a lot of pressure on Captain O'Connell to basically squash this proof of concept, to have it fail. And O'Connell wasn't having anything to do with that. Right. He didn't really say much. I mean, he would smile when people, voiced their concerns that way. But this guy had just superb integrity. Integrity means what you think, what you say, and how you act are all in alignment. And he knew that as an officer in the U.S. Navy, his primary mission was to serve the best interests of the country and all the stakeholders. And so he actually had an attitude that what's right for the country may not be right for the SEALs or for the perception of all SEAL leaders, but it was the right thing to do. And so he knew that if the Marines were capable and competent, and he believed that they were, then they deserved a seat at the table. That incredible integrity is a cornerstone of respect. And I watched that firsthand. Now, it wasn't easy. The Marines, did a few things because they were new to this whole world that could have easily led them to be disqualified. And a lesser officer would have disqualified them. For instance, when we got to Baghdad, the Marines were not quite prepared for operating. When the SEALs went over to Afghanistan, it was the first time that we really had a ground mobility war, right? So SEALs are maritime special ops. We're supposed to have one flipper in the water at all times. And here we find ourselves in the middle of this mountainous terrain, and we need to get from A to B. And we were used to basically hiking or rucking, right? Or, riding these things called desert patrol vehicles when I was in, which are like basically souped up doom buggies with 50 cal machine guns. And those were not very suitable, right, for getting around. And so we began to develop the capability of using Humvees, which, we had to armor up. So this is the beginning of, where we had up-armored Humvees. We never used those before. And now, obviously, you wouldn't think of going into a high-threat environment with IEDs and explosives and mortars or RPGs without an up-armored vehicle. And a lot of them came out of these early years where we trialed a bunch of different ways to armor up Humvees and even F-150s to turn them into armored personnel carriers. So when the SEAL Team 1 went over to Baghdad, we had all of our Humvees with us and we were ready to roll because by that time it was becoming a high threat environment, meaning we went from George Bush declaring victory to now there's IEDs going off every day, people with RPGs trying to take out our patrols and our vehicles. And it was really, really risky. And you needed an armored vehicle basically to cruise around town and to go get your missions done. Well, the Marines were fascinated. They had studied desert warfare by Rommel. They had this fantasy that they were going to be running around the middle of the desert. And so they brought over these Mercedes IFABs. And these things were light armored and they were not suitable. Immediately, it became clear they're not suitable for urban combat. And the problem was it was going to take 6 months for the Marines to get them Humvees through the procurement channels. So right there, a lesser SEAL officer would have been gleefully licking his chops saying, sorry, guys, you fail the proof of concept. You're shit out of luck. Better luck next time. And yet Jim McConnell didn't do this, right? So he ordered a guy named Bart Jackson, who was warrant officer at the time. And Bart worked for SEAL Team 1, and his unofficial title from Commander Wilson was the Asset Reallocation Specialist. So it says something about this guy's creativity, right? So in wartime, you got to be creative. And the SEAL Team 1 said, well, our mission here is to support these Marines in this proof of concept. And if they don't have vehicles, they can't, get things done, then they won't be able to fight the war. And so the war will be not as well prosecuted if we don't let these 100 men loose, highly trained Marines. And so he turned to Bart and said, okay, Bart, see what you can do to get these guys some Humvees. Bart disappeared for a couple of days. Suddenly, I remember this as clear as day. He came cruising back into the compound with a bunch of SEALs driving these, I think there were like 8 different Humvees. And they drove them over to the SEAL compound and they got out their welding kit and they started welding steel plates to the Humvees to up armor them. The Marines saw this was happening. The word got out that these were their vehicles and they came over and insisted on helping out. And so now you had SEALs and Marines working together to up armor these vehicles, which are going to allow these Marines to get into the fight. It's incredible. So who knows what deal that Bart made, but he found them through a National Guard unit that wasn't using them. And some promises were made. And within a week, he had armored vehicles for the Marines. Incredible story, actually. And the Marines went on to do a great job. I got the study done. We ended up recommending in my report that the Marines have a place at the table, but with a unique force structure and with a unique mission set, like I mentioned earlier. And that's actually ultimately what happened. And now the Marine Raiders and Marine SOCOM, or MARSOC, Marine Corps Special Operations Command, is a valiant part of, a very productive part of the Special Operations community. 3 key aspects of this principle of respect. I've already hit on one: integrity. Say what you mean what you say, and then follow through relentlessly. That was demonstrated time and time again by Captain O'Connell. I remember him telling his troops, hey, you want to be careful when you make decisions. We want you to push the envelope, but I also want you not to do anything stupid. So what we're going to deploy is the New York Times test. So ask yourself before you make any decision, would I like to read about this in the Monday edition of the New York Times? That served me well quite a few times. The second principle is authenticity, right? Just radical authenticity. Take the mask off. Jim McConnell had no mask, right? He was super authentic, okay to be vulnerable, admitted when he was wrong, admitted when he didn't know something or didn't have all the answers, and treated everyone with respect, which was the key principle here. So in order to treat others with respect, you have to be humble and authentic, and you have to respect yourself and respect your limitations as well as your strengths. And so authenticity is really important, and that was demonstrated very clearly with O'Connell. And then the last principle is clarity. Be very clear about what you stand for and what your expectations are. So in those meetings with O'Connell, it became obvious to me that he was very clear that he wasn't going to succumb to the political pressure that was directed toward him to have the Marines fail. He was going to do what was right for the force and for special operations and for the country. The type of clarity is so important and so powerful. And when you find people, or if you possess that radical clarity and you can express it and stand your ground around what you believe to be right and the right course of action, then that breeds great respect as well. There's a shadow of respect, and shadow side of respect is basically the fear of being judged or criticized, right? So if you have a deep fear of being judged or being seen as, not competent or not having all the answers, and you're the leader, then that's going to lead to inauthentic behavior because you're going to be covering that up, with some sort of perfectionism or, some behavior which is going to be obvious to those around you and your team, even though you might think you're hiding it pretty well. So you've got to be able to stare down your fear of criticism and judgment and just lay it out there. Lay it bare. Be who you authentically are. Warts and all. Admit your failures. Admit your, drawbacks, and just demonstrate that in spite of those, you do everything you can, right, to bring clear expectations and clarity and communication and vision and integrity and authenticity into your work. And if you do that, you will develop tremendous respect, and it'll be built on trust and courage. Hope this is helpful. Thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Mark Divine Show. Please rate and review the show wherever you listen. We're on our 10th season, I think. So it's very helpful if you continue to rate it. We've got shooting for 5,000 5-star reviews, and also share it with anyone that you think would benefit. So thanks again. Till next time, be respectful. Hoo-yah. Divine out.